Hello everyone, it's Maha here. Thank you for joining me for Maha's Picks. And I know this is going to be kind of a late video. When I first started this series, I want to do my picks in the beginning of the month. And I don't know, it didn't turn out that way, so I feel like I should apologize. But I know that you understand that sometimes life sometimes takes over and things don't go as you plan. So it's been a very challenging month, kind of really trying month, and it's a bit interesting because the theme that I've picked for this month, actually really it feels like it's a theme that's been going on for me for some time, and the theme is balance. And balance, I feel like naturally is happening all the time in nature. And for my picks, my original thought was that I would choose just one deck and just one essential oil, just one crystal that could kind of have the feeling of the month for different reasons, like astrologically and as far as changes in the seasons, how I feel I relate to nature, and then also that all of that reflects inside on kind of the things that I'm working through. It's been a very, very interesting and challenging experience. And because I've made this commitment to do these picks every month, to be honest, this month was, I almost didn't do it. I almost didn't post my Maha's picks, but I just couldn't. I'm a person who, once I make a commitment, I stick to it no matter what. So I woke up at 6 in the morning this morning and I was super stressed that I might not get this video done. So I'm just gonna do it now. And I know the sun is right in my face and there's nothing I can do about that, because the way I centered my video camera, there's no way I could change that. Hopefully you'll see the cards. So let's get started. I originally thought that my theme for December would be to focus on the idea of winter solstice, of the rebirth of the sun. And so with that idea, I thought that for my deck, a long time ago when I thought about this, I would choose a deck that has the God energy. So because I don't have a deck with God energy, I went and I researched, and really the only deck I found was the Gods and Titans deck. And personally, I don't resonate with that deck so much. It's probably the images that I don't resonate with, and I don't think I could justify buying a deck that I'm not going to use. And then I thought, okay, what else is there? What other gods decks are there? Because we have goddess decks. And then I thought, how about I just choose a deck which has gods and goddess? Because I realized that the winter solstice is about rebirth of the sun. And it's also the longest night of the year. So how does that fit in? I mean, where is the goddess there? We focus on the rebirth of the god, at least I do. And then, but the important thing is that the longest night of the year, that's very symbolic. First of all, the moon, the phase of the moon, the lunation cycle, metaphorically linked in astrology to winter solstice, is the new moon. So with the new moon, even though we don't see the moon, the energy of the sun is super strong, because the sun and the moon are right next to each other. They call that conjunction in astrology. So they're really close to each other, and we're blinded by the light of the sun. Hence, we can't see the moon. So that energy of the sun and the moon connecting is so symbolic, I thought. And why not do a balanced theme where I'm focusing on the god and the goddess, the night and the day, the light and the dark. And this dance, this relationship that the sun and the moon have with each other every day, so fascinating, because if you think about it, without the light of the sun, we would never see the moon. So the sun illuminates the beauty of the moon. And they're just constantly in this dance, in this conversation, in this coming to balance, and the sun reflecting on the moon and then the moon responding back. It's very dynamic. It's So interesting how nature just there's balance, a sense of balance everywhere in nature. So getting into my deck. I picked this deck, one of my all-time favorites. So you can see it, the Mythic Oracle deck. The Mythic Oracle, wisdom of the ancient Greek pantheon. And this is a deck by Carissa Milado, artwork by Michelle Lee Phelan. Now, she used to be called that, now she's called Raven Phelan, and she illustrated the Messenger Oracle by Blue Angel. Now, this deck that I have, this one particular edition, is not by Blue Angel, it's the older one, and it's by Beyond Worlds. I'm trying to get away from the sun, sorry guys. And so the Beyond Worlds is it's an older edition of the same deck. As far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Blue Angel deck of Mythic Oracle is exactly the same, except that the box looks different. So that's the only thing. And this is a 35 card deck with a 160-page guidebook. I've had this deck for eons and eons. I've had it for so long. It's one of my first decks, Oracle decks, that I've had. And I cherish this deck so much. It's taught me so much. The book that it comes with, is a really great book. And I'm going to take you guys through this book. I'll go ahead and show you the pages and what it contains, because that's necessary. I'm going to show you some of the cards, but I'll change the angle of the camera so you can actually see them. And so this is the back of the cards. Don't know if you can see that. It's like a golden emblem of a creature with wings. And the cards are gorgeous. The illustrations are very bold, very dynamic, very in alignment with the god or the goddess or the magical being represented. This deck has not just gods and goddesses, but magical beings and like Chiron, for example, and heroes. And it has, as far as I found with all the gods and goddesses decks, it's the most balanced deck that actually has equal number of the feminine and the masculine energy. And it's a deck that makes me realize how connected we are and how our energies are connected. This deck has helped me understand the archetypes, the psychological archetypes behind the mythology, behind the myths of the characters. When I started studying astrology a couple of years ago, that's when I bought this deck. Well, actually it was 3 years ago. And I remember we were learning about archetypes in astrology and mythology, and having this deck helped me a lot. This little book is really well written. It's you'll see it's got enough amount of information in it for you to understand something about the mythology. So if you're someone who's a beginner, wants to learn Greek mythology, it's Greek mythology only, by the way, Greek pantheon only, which I think is fine. It's I really think that the cultures overlap their myths, and I'm so fascinated by parallel mythology, how we can find the same energy or the archetype of a goddess and god in another culture that's totally different. So it's a good place to start for someone who is interested in mythology in general and wants to get a grasp of the Greek mythology in particular. And it's just a good, beautiful deck to work with. It's very nurturing. I find that the messages are really strong, and the book is really good at telling you advice about the messages and then teaching you about the archetype that could play out in your life in a certain way. So I highly recommend it. Let's see if I can say anything else. Then we can go and look at the cards a little bit. I'm not going to show you all of them, but you know, there's some characters in here that you obviously know and everybody knows and recognizes, like the popular ones, and then there's some that you might not know. So it's a good blend, it's a good mix. I would say, again, that this is a very balanced card. Sometimes, I mean, I love goddess decks, but sometimes I also want to have that god energy. I wish that they would make more cards focusing on the god and goddess aspect, maybe from different cultures. That would be really interesting. Okay, so without talking too much, let's go ahead and look at the book first. So before I go ahead and show you guys the book, I just wanted to flip through a few of the cards and show you how the feminine and masculine energies are represented in this deck, which I feel is really balanced. So it really shows the archetypes of the feminine and masculine. By the way, the lighting right now is kind of yellowish, so just bear with me. At the end of the video, I'm going to take you through the cards in a more natural lighting. So here we have Athena, goddess of wisdom, goddess represented to the air element, the element of thinking, that male element, air and fire being linked to a masculine element. And here we have a feminine archetype representing the air quality of thinking, of strategy, of thought, of planning, not just responding and reacting, but responding in a more strategic way, in a wise way, thinking your way through things. And then you have Aphrodite, who represents that water element, emotions, feeling your way through things. And actually Aphrodite here, she's represented with blonde hair. To me, that describes Venus more than Aphrodite, the Roman version of the same goddess. Aphrodite, to me, one of my favorite representations of her as far as imagery in oracle decks is in the Goddess Oracle deck. Here you see her with curly hair, dark curly hair. That is, to me, a perfect image of Aphrodite. Anyway, that was just a side note. I love that deck. I've done a review of it in the past. So here we have the water and the air of the feminine. And then opposite to the goddess of war, we have the god of war, Mars, or Ares in Greek. The keyword here is battle. So Mars is that fiery energy of war as opposed to this air energy of war. And then, again to the masculine, we have right here the archetype Orpheus, archetype linked to the poet, the artist, the musician, and the keyword here is faith. So we have that, again, that kind of watery, emotional element that went with Orpheus' archetype as he went to fetch his lover from the underworld, from the hands of Hades. And I love that story. It's very romantic. So just to show, just those two were just examples. Then coming back to Athena, each archetype, of course, has its lower octave and higher octave. And in a reading, that can make it really complex and can just lighten up and begin some really deep discussions I found with this deck. So the lower octave, the higher octave would be wisdom and responding in a place of thought, of thought processes rather than quick action. And then the lower octave would be perhaps denying our irrational emotions. And oftentimes the shadow side of Athena is Medusa. Now, there is no goddess Medusa represented in the card here, which is a bit of a shame because I find Medusa's mythology very, very interesting and highly fascinating, highly complex, and I love her dark goddess archetype. In this deck you have a few, I think 3, if I'm not mistaken, dark goddesses, but not many, and that's not a bad, it's not a negative criticism because there's only 45 cards and they wanted to include many different gods and goddesses. But I wish this one was in there. Athena, so as the myth goes, sends Perseus, who right here represents courage, to go and behead Medusa, as the myth goes. And you might be already familiar with this myth, of course. And the snake goddess represents that darker side of Athena, whether it's from jealousy or anger that the beautiful Medusa was turned into a Gorgon monster. She does represent that side of Athena that can be neglected or not dealt with, not come into terms head on, face to face. And in the end, Perseus delivers the head of Medusa to Athena. And it's really interesting because her blood, Medusa's blood that comes from her head, can poison and heal at the same time. Athena gave some of Medusa's blood to Hygeia, who is the daughter of Asclepius, the god of healing and medicine. So that, I thought, was, as a side note, kind of a really cool and complex way that you can link all these archetypes together when you're doing a reading, which is what I really am fascinated about. And I really love the representation of Cronus, which is the Roman Saturn. I love this because his face is just really glowing, really forgiving, almost hopeful, glorious. And Saturn is usually linked to the opposite of those things. I mean, in astrology, Saturn is the malefic planet in classical astrology, linked to bad luck and difficulties, hardships, old age. And then in psychological astrology, also a planet that brings challenges and things we have to face to build stamina and strength, control of our inner psyche, and patience. And here he does represent patience, but it's in a glorified way, in a non-intimidating way, as opposed to Capricorn and Saturn usually being linked to like the devil card or the more difficult things in astrology that we come across. So now we're going to go look at the book, and I wanted to read later after I show you the book just a little brief part in the book on this card, because I can maybe that will give you an idea of how the book beautifully guides you to use these archetypes for personal healing. All right, so let's take a look at the Mythic Oracle book, that book. So the gods and goddesses are here split up into different categories. So you got the table of contents. So the protogenoi, who are the primordial gods and goddesses, there are 4 of them listed. And the Titans go from card number 5 to 13. Then Olympians 14 to 26, 14 to 32, magical beings 33 to 37, and heroes 38 to 45. We got a beautiful intro explaining the different gods and goddess archetype categories and groupings. Then some spreads. You've got the nature spread, the relationship spread, the archetype spread, which is really interesting actually, cycle spread, hero spread, and then you go into the card meanings. And you got a little myth here. So one paragraph telling you about the myth, which is good. It's concise, it's to the point, and it tells you the myth really in a accurate way. And then you got the messages with some questions and reflections. So I'm going to read you here Chronos. I won't read you the myth of it, but I'd like to read you the card message. So before I do that, the book goes all the way through to the end. And at the end, you've got a section which is a glossary of all of the gods and goddesses here. So sort of like a glossary of all the meanings. I think that's page 6. finger's getting stuck to it. Okay, yeah, so here's the glossary, and we got some pages at the end telling you who the myths, who they are, and how to pronounce their names. Now, Chronos, representing the cycles of life, the cycles of nature. Very important lessons. Okay, so the message: nature is filled with cycles, including the cycles that exist within our own lives. All things change, and when we embrace and flow with these changes, they enrich both our lives and our experience of life. It can be frightening, but new life is only possible once we accept change. When we resist the natural cycles of change, we become tyrannical, clinging to the old order. And this is perfect, by the way, because that's exactly what Saturn represents. We feel a sense of deadness followed by bitterness, frustration, fear, and anxiety. When we flow with our changing selves and changing places within the world, we remain connected to life, nature, and ourselves. So then it asks you some questions for you to review cycles going on in your own life. For example, how have you become stuck? Are you trying to hold on to things in a certain way, or should you let go of them? Are you afraid of moving on to the next phase of your life? Blah, blah, blah. It continues and goes on to exploring. Exploration is it's a very good deck for self-exploration. It helped me a lot for a period of time in my life when I was going through some difficult things, and I was also learning about astrology and mythology, so all of those interests tied together made this deck a perfect deck for me. And I highly recommend it to you guys. So I'm just going to go right ahead now and give you a quick tour of the cards in the better lighting. I really feel that the artist has beautifully and very successfully captured this divine-like essence that in a way transcends the human figures they embody. And there is a sense of serenity and poise that can be seen in a very powerful and balanced way through the use of color, form, and more importantly, facial expressions. So we're going to start with the first grouping, which are the 4 primordial gods and goddesses: Mother, Father, Uranus, and Gaia. So see how pensive he is, how kind of very elegant quality to these figures, these images. Pontus and Hemera. I really love how they portrayed Pontus, because this is one of the gods I don't see very often. I love the keyword, the unknown. So it's like that deep ocean, vastness of the deep ocean. Very different from Poseidon, whom we'll meet in a moment. And then we've got the Titans, the group of the Titans. Cronus, Rhea, so beautiful. Look at the colors and the sense of depth. Prometheus. I don't know if I'm going to read all the keywords, but Mnemosyne, inspiration. Atlas, responsibility. Themis, natural order. Selene, intuition. I love how she glows with the silvery moonlight. And look at the contrast. Helios, illumination. Eos, new beginnings. So powerful. Zeus, lightning. Divine expansion. Demeter, harvest. Hera, duty. Look how relaxed she is, just lounging. So Hera. Hades, the underworld. This is Poseidon. Earthshaker, perfect. Artemis, purity. Apollo. Look at his face. Clarity. I love this image of Pan. Very peaceful, very gentle in a sort of natural way. Nature. Hephaestus? Hephaestus, sorry. That's the husband of Aphrodite. Nice. Work is the key word there. Dionysus. Persephone. So lovely. I love this image of Persephone. There's the glow, and then the moonlight in the background, and then there's the watery underworld feeling. Eros, Aphrodite. She's all in her glory with her belt and roses in the background. Hermes, very airy. Athena, Hestia, home and hearth. Eris, very powerful, strong and confident. Hebe, Iris, she's so beautiful. And then we've got, so that was the Olympians. And then here we've got magical beings. There's 5 of them. Pandora, Chiron, I love Chiron, the healer. The Moira, Hecate. Thanatos, which is death. Very powerful, beautiful image. And the last groupings of the heroes and heroines. The females here, Psyche and Helen of Troy. And look at how the heroes have a sense of masculine yet not macho, confident, not harsh. Bellerophon, Perseus, Hercules. See, there's a sense of balance of soft and hard edges, as I call it. Odysseus, Orpheus, and Achilles. And that's all the cards. So the heroes are great too because they show different aspects of the male and female in a heroic way. So that was my pick for December as far as the cards. Thanks so much for watching, guys. And as always, I'll see you in Maha's Picks Part 2. Take care.